In this episode of the No Cold Calls Ever show, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mike Sedita. Mike has been a publisher for about 2.5 years, and he's no stranger to breaking sales records. But his latest record was, well, special. Mike is hot off the heels of smashing the BVM record for most sales in 1 month in the history of the company. For the month of December 2023, Mike brought in over $500,000 in sales. That's $558,421.80 to be exact. To put this in perspective, he bested the previous record by $80,000. How did he do it? Well, let's take a listen as Mike peels back the curtain to his record-setting month and how he's scaled his operation over the past 2 years to achieve even more success going forward.
Hello?
Hi, it's the No Cold Calls Ever show.
Go away.
Well, welcome back, listeners and viewers, to, hey, maybe this is your first episode. This is actually, if you're counting, episode number 4. And boy, do we have a treat for you today. We have, I don't know, can I call you a legend, Mike? If you aren't already, you soon will be. We have the legendary Mike Sedita. And I say that because he truly is. Something happened last month, and last month was December of 2023. And I just found out about it the other day, and I almost fell off my chair. So, Mike, you're starting to turn red, and I know you're not a self-promoter, but I'm going to promote you here because what you did is phenomenal. I am so thrilled and happy for you because as I said to you in my text, you worked your tail off. I know how hard you were working, and I don't even know it all. And you pulled off a monster of a month. So, if you don't mind, just share real quick with everyone what happened in December. Then I want you to get into your background.
Charlie, you're making me sweat. I'm on the other side of this usually, and now I'm on this side of it. So I appreciate the little intro there. The month of December really it was like a bunch of things coming together. The company had started offering this 3-month ad upgrade to sponsors. And what I had done is went through my list of sponsors and I looked at a couple things to kind of get this perfect storm, if you will. And at one point with BVM, BVM was print and DTS was digital. And then sometime in 2023, they combined the two and clients started getting single billing and it was more convenient for clients. So what I did is not just go to them and try to upgrade them, but one of the things I used to upgrade them was the ability to consolidate their billing. So I went to clients and I upgraded them on some new features, but I also said, hey, while we do this, not only can I get you 3 additional months right out of the gate upgraded, but I can also consolidate your billing. So a few of my existing clients just jumped right on that, and it helped to pump that number up over $500,000 for the month.
Yeah. So cool. And the numbers reflect it. There's more to, well, in your case, multi-million-dollar sales years than just going after the next big fish or the next lead, but maximizing all your opportunities. So very, very cool. You went back to a number of your existing sponsors and kind of repackaged their program, right?
And the old adage is it's easier to retain business than it is to go out and get new business. So cultivating that relationship and showing them that you're trying to add some value. And listen, BVM did a great job by offering the 3 months. Yeah. It made it enticing for them. But I just took the previous thing that they had done to make things a little simpler, and I started to package it together with clients that were in relatively new contracts, extending them out for a year, 2 years, 3 years, consolidating billing and getting them the upgrade. So it worked out for everybody.
Yeah. And of course, you have great relationships, which allows you to get their attention and to schedule another meeting and do all that fun stuff. So
yeah, it was great.
Good for you. Yeah. So why publishing? How did you get into this business?
Well, I had spent 20 years in corporate finance. I worked for insurance companies and finance firms and did a whole bunch of different things that bored me to death for 20 years. And then when the real estate market crashed back in '09, 2010, we were in the middle of it, I got let go from a job. And a buddy of mine said, "Hey, I have a media buying agency. You should come and see if you're any good at this." And I stumbled into it. They told me, "Hey, it's going to take about 6 months before you actually make a sale." And I ended up selling a big account like in the first 3 weeks. And they were like, "All right, well, you could have this office now and we'll get started." And then I spent about a year with that company. And then another friend of mine, we went off and started our own ad agency. And it kind of just snowballed into media. And then when I moved to Florida in 2019 to take care of my sick folks, I needed to find something that kept me local and I wasn't traveling or doing any of that stuff. And BVM reached out to me through my LinkedIn profile, and one thing led to another, and next thing I know, I'm in training, and next thing I know, I'm making my first sale with your assistance.
That's right. Wow, wow. Well, yeah, yeah. And I won't even say you've come a long way. I mean, it was obvious. It was just a matter of you would have knocked it out of the park, whether I was there or not. But I hear you, and that's a wonderful thing with the culture that I was in, that you currently are in, having so many folks that are willing to lend a hand and help without any monetary gain, right?
It is nice. I mean, right now in the Tampa market, we have some people that are getting started. Finally, the market is starting to take hold, and some people are getting in there, and it's nice to watch them. It's one thing to do it on your own; you kind of work off your sweat equity. But when you have a little part in helping somebody else, like a publisher texted me, made her first couple sales, and she said, "Thank you, our paths crossed, and this worked out." And I said, "Listen, it doesn't matter. Just when you're on the stage next year getting your $1 million award, make sure everybody knows that it's all because of me, and then we'll go from there." And have this joke, but it's gratifying seeing other people get their start and get going.
Yeah. Well, you never know. It's those little things that maybe doesn't look like it's much, but can be the difference between that publisher really knocking it out of the park, or for that matter, leaving the industry, which
Right,
is always a sad thing.
right.
So, how about what would you say is your inside advantage?
I could tell you, I would love to say that it's all me. I think the thing that makes me successful at this is the team that I have behind me. I took this
Mm.
to heart when I started. My division manager said, "Listen, fill up your calendar, fill up your white space on your calendar, and make sure you're focusing on revenue generating activity." I do some networking stuff and I make those appearances to cultivate those relationships. But when it comes to actually putting someone in one of my publications, my process is very simple. I meet with them, revenue generating activity, they sign their agreement. I say, "Listen, Charlie, as soon as I get back to my office, you're going to get an email from me introducing you to my team." And sure enough, I send that email out to my assistant, to my content coordinator, and I say, "Maggie's going to help you with your ad and Sandy's going to help you with your content." And I put it in their hands, and then I continue to cultivate that relationship with the client. But when it comes to uploading ads and writing content and all the other stuff that makes the magazine pretty, I leave that to people who do it better than me. And I guess the short answer is knowing what I do well and sticking to that, and
Mm.
finding people who do the stuff I need to have done well, who do it well.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you found like that because you probably did for example, the deadline thing once or twice, and when you get someone to do it, it's, oh my lord, they're so much better at this, and they
Yeah.
actually enjoy
Yeah.
doing it.
So my assistant, she has another job, and there's 1 month out of the year happens to be December where she's a little bit busier. And I got a
Uh-huh.
text saying, "Hey, can you look at this ad upload? I'm having a problem. I can't do it." And I went, "Oh shoot, let me go back and give myself a refresher course on how to do an ad upload." But I mean, I did it. But yeah, again, exactly
Yeah,
that. What takes me, like painting my house, I could probably paint my house. It would
yeah.
take me like a month. It would take a painter 2 days. So it's just finding the right people for the right job.
I'm going to throw in a tip there because that happened to me once as well. And by the way, one of the best decisions I ever made in the publishing business was to get that assistant to take care of all that deadline stuff. I call it deadline days, DAZE, because
Yeah.
you can walk around in a day. I know publishers are for a week. They're like, oh my God, the deadline's coming up in 3 days, and then they need days to recover after. And it's like craziness,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, it was an RGP. How did you phrase it about the cash? Focusing your energy on the
Revenue generating
activity.
activity.
There we go. Revenue generating activity. Yeah. And so, as you well know, I mean, it's a question that we always ask ourselves, even in my new business. If what I'm doing right now, I equate it to, I mean, my lord, I'm, again, not going to embarrass you, but your hourly rate is in the area of $300 to $500 an hour,
Right.
right? How many weeks a year you work, and you reverse engineer that, folks. So if you want to earn $500,000 or whatever that number is back into it, and ask yourself, you're gonna find that you're in that 300, 400, $500 or more an hour range. So ask yourself, is what I'm doing right now, whether it's ad deadline stuff or admin stuff or responding to emails, worth $300 an hour? Or can I hire someone who loves doing that for whatever the going rate is, 15, 20, 25, $30 an hour, right?
It is absolutely, that's one of my peeves, having someone miss an appointment with me. For me in Tampa, if I have to drive to Tampa from Wesley Chapel and it's 30 minutes and someone no shows an appointment, that's why for me, I'm very maybe against what the orthodoxy is. I do send people meeting invites. We're business people. It's
Yeah.
got to be on your
Yeah.
calendar. I know if it's not on my calendar, I forget it. So I make sure I do that because I would rather somebody cancel on me the day before, even 2 hours before, than
Yeah.
me waste 90 minutes of my
Yeah.
time going to a spot, waiting there, getting ready to go. And then, so it's just how you approach it. For me, there's more value in them canceling up front and rescheduling than me going and wasting my time doing
Yeah.
that. And it's all comes down to what my rate is per hour.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Good stuff. So back to before I forget, what helped me, because I would forget. You're right. After you stop doing the deadline days stuff for a few months or even a few years, and then all of a sudden, hey, someone gets sick or new job and all that. That's always in the back of my mind. How do we protect ourselves against that? And if your listeners are familiar with Loom, LOOM, look it up. You can do 25 free Looms before you have to pay for anything or just record a video. But I would I walk through that whole deadline deal for my content coordinator. I had her do it. And I didn't even train her. I just said, hey Sydney, follow the videos. And if there's anything missing, let me know so we can fix it. And then think about the peace of mind you have. Now, if 2 years later or that December next year that individual can't do it, you can bring someone else on your team to say, follow the videos, right?
Right.
Or we have something to follow because we forgot everything. Anyway, so number one tip for new publishers, what would that be?
I think the most important tip that I could give a new publisher, number one, is get organized. And in that vein, getting a database that you use or a CRM that you use that helps you to stay on task. And there's a bunch of them out there. There's various ones you can use. When I first started, I used one and I used a spreadsheet to begin with, but then I'm like tracking every column and seeing all this stuff, and I was getting things were getting lost. So I started using it. I started using a CRM that gave me 6 a.m. every morning. I'd be in the gym. I'd get an email and it would say, these are your action items for the day. Boom. That's what I have to focus on. And then the other nice part about it is, I mean, there's a bunch of nice features in it, but it tracks emails. So if I send you an email, hey, Charlie, I met you the other day at the Rotary Club. I would love to talk to you about your marketing. I see when you open it, how many times you open it, and then I can magically randomly say follow up when I know you've looked at it 3 or 4 times. So it gives me some insight into the engagement with the sponsor that I'm trying to get to. So there's all sorts of stuff out there you could use. That really helped me to stay on task because I would get up, I'd have these leads in my head, but I didn't really have it organized, and the CRM did it for me. That's important. Big,
Yeah.
important task.
Yeah. You can waste so much time trying to get organized or use it as an excuse not to
Right.
do what
Not to do
maybe.
work.
Yeah.
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 Not to
Yeah.
do revenue generating activity.
Yep. Yep. RGA. How about, let's go back in time. If you were to start over tomorrow and with the knowledge that you have today, what would you do differently to accelerate your success and your income?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been pretty fortunate. There's all stories of people that come out of training and go to print in days, not weeks, weeks, not
Mm,
months. My story wasn't that. I mean, in the beginning, when I was first getting started, I did cross sales right away so that I could generate some income. And then I started focusing on my baseline. But a funny story, and I don't know if you know this, but I was going to print on my first magazine, and then and I had cross sold into this other magazine close by me. And it just so happened that through happenstance, the publisher was going into something new and that magazine became available. And I ended up flipping a second magazine before I even published my first magazine. And there was a sports magazine that was with it. So before I published a single magazine with BVM, I published three in February of 2022. So it was like, hey, get your feet in the fire. We're just going to throw you in the volcano. And it took me about 3 months to really, there was no days, like no AZE
yeah.
haze, but there was so many moving parts of three publications when I hadn't even published one, getting content sorted out. So it was finding those people. So I wouldn't say that didn't accelerate my success. It definitely, having multiple publications helps, but there's also some inherent cost that goes along with having multiple publications.
Yeah.
So if I was gonna do it all over again, I would probably, I mean, that circumstance forgiven there, but I would probably start with one publication, build it out to a level where I was comfortable with the content, the number of pages, the number of sponsors, the level above baseline, and then maybe roll into a second. But it went the way it went. And when I started my third publication, but out of the three that I started right out of the gate, one of them we ended up consolidating into two other magazines. And then I started a third publication, and that one is my healthiest magazine. I mean, it is in
Hmm.
an area of great growth. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it has done really well. But it's kind of taking the model that I would have done originally with that third
Interesting.
magazine. I'm using that and building it up, and it's been wildly successful. So
Yeah.
scale appropriately would be
Yeah.
my suggestion.
So sounds like just picking a target. You want, whether it's an income, I want to have this much income coming my way every month, or number of pages in the magazine. I mean, is that kind of where you head when you
Yeah,
make
I
those
mean,
decisions?
for me, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. BVM does a great job with all these incentives and things they offer and all these different programs. For me, I only focus on one number, and that's the bottom line on my revenue statement. And that's
Yeah.
affected by multiple magazines, obviously, which means multiple baselines, things like that. I want to get to a point where I know my income is at X, and then
Yeah.
I can take on another task to know that what it's going to take me to get my income to the next level and the next
Yeah.
level. So
Yeah.
just scaling it in a level of comfortability so that I'm not opening another magazine and then kind of going backwards, trying to avoid that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Very, very helpful. All right. This next topic, something everyone experiences, regardless of what business you're in, the dreaded sales slump. How do you handle that?
So I worked with a guy probably, I don't know, it's been about 13 or 14 years ago. And he said poetically, there's only so many sales calls, only so many cold calls a person can make. Like even the best salesman reaches a point when they just can't do any more cold calls. So like I don't have a problem doing the cold calls, but it really truly is probably the most difficult thing. You owned a gym, right? So they used to say, what's the heaviest weight in the gym? And it's the front door, right? That used to be the joke. In BVM, the heaviest obstacle to overcome is picking up that phone and getting those three yeses. And for me, there's all sorts of stuff. Whether you're a publisher, if you're fresh out of training and you're gung-ho and you do this and you say, hey, no, it's never going to happen to me. It happens to everybody at some point. You get that fatigue, that phone calling fatigue. And I've found multiple ways around it. Now, look, I don't want to debunk the orthodoxy. I still make my phone calls. I still get my yeses. At what level I do it at, it might not be 3 yeses a day anymore, but I've added an appointment setter. That appointment setter offsets some of my 3 yeses to get their yeses. But again, that's a cost involved in that. And then the other thing I started doing in the spring of last year was I took on doing the Good Neighbor podcast as a way to supplement what I was doing on my end to generate those leads with without having to do a lot of I don't want to say a lot of the work, but it's very automated. And
Yeah.
that really helped me re-engage and get back in that mode of, I got to get on these appointments every week. I got to be doing these appointments. So the appointment setter helped. The podcast helped me get out of a slump that I was in. I mean, I wrote down the numbers. It's funny. I have it here. From January to July, I did under $300,000 for the year with BVM. The 3 months after that, from August 1st to October 31st, I did another 230,000. So I was at around 580,000 going into November. And then I ended up doing 663,000 over November and December. So it got me reinvigorated.
Yeah.
It got me going again to the point where I saw the activity happening. And I know from experience, once you get a couple of those deals signed, it's almost contagious. It just kind of gets you rolling. And the podcast and the appointment setter are two of the things that kind of, a podcast just appears on my calendar to record, and boom, I do it. I get engaged with that sponsor, get them in front of them to talk about the magazine, and it just kind of automation does it for me. So it works.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. It was the same for me. You're right. In those times, it comes down to, for me, and I think you've talked to sales trainers who know what they're doing, not myself, activity, right? But the right activity, not polishing your stapler, not all right, this week I'm going to reorganize my database.
Right.
Meet with people, whether you meet with them at networking or chamber events or call them, or like you and I both know, the podcast, because we have them to ourselves, man. That's like however many minutes of just great one-on-one interaction, and you get to know folks, they get to know you. So
Charlie, not to jump in, there's a couple of things I want to touch on what you just said. Is polishing my stapler and reorganizing my database. That's something I do on a Saturday or a Sunday when I don't have anything going on. So there's a time for that. But the other thing I wanted to really point out, and this is kind of the misconception, I think, broadly, of what people think of the podcast. The podcast, to me, is no different than me joining a networking group, me joining a Rotary Club, or me joining the Chamber of Commerce. It is a way for me to get those relationships built. And the nice thing about it comparatively is, if I go to a chamber event, I have to go sit at a chamber event, and there's maybe 3 or 4 people I might talk to in the 3 hours I'm there, because someone corners me and I'm stuck and I got to get dressed and I got to actually entertain people. Whereas with the podcast, they take 20 minutes to do them end to end, maybe 30 minutes. So in that same 3 hours, I'm getting 2, 4, 6 different people that I'm actually getting a genuine one-to-one connection with. And it allows me the ability to set that appointment right there. Whereas when you're at a networking event, people are like, oh, we don't do business here. This is just us networking. So there is a differentiation as far as how the connection goes. And it's a little bit more, for me, it's a little bit more personal. I learn things about people before the podcast, on the podcast, and then when I set the appointment with them. Then when I go to the BVM appointment, I just sit down and it's, hey, Charlie, did you hear your podcast? How did you like it? And it immediately there's a connection. And it goes right into, let me show you how we can get you embedded in the community. And it just saves me all that initial time on my BVM appointment.
Yeah. Sounds like revenue generating activity to me.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it definitely is revenue generating, but what's nice about it is the automation, because a lot of it's getting done without me even having to touch it. It's just there.
Yeah. Or pay for someone to do it. So,
right.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Which leads into our next question, which is scaling your business, and you were thrown into the fire. Holy cow, I didn't realize you started with 3 magazines all at once. I mean, it was sink or swim. So how do you scale your publishing business?
For me, I said my third magazine is the one that's the healthiest right now. It's mainly finding, I mean, look, we talk about this in the different levels of BVM. There's market leaders, there's division leaders. We talk about, look, the geography isn't super important as far as the type of people that we target. But what I've found for me is I've had a ton of success finding areas that are on the up and coming and getting in there and having something earmarked. So like I have, in my grand scheme of things, there's a couple little areas in the Tampa market, and I don't want to say them on the podcast because somebody will listen to this and swoop in and take them. But there's a couple little areas that are on the up and coming. And I
Mhm.
know that if I'm going to scale my business, finding the right area, timing it right, the audience is the same. The BVM audience is the same. The homeowners, home values, et cetera, household income, that doesn't change. But finding the markets as they're up and coming, because what I found with, especially with my third magazine, is people see that area and they know it's a growth area, and businesses know it's a growth area. There aren't companies that are embedded in that area forever and ever and ever that they have to fight against. It's almost like the Wild West. You're in there, you have the local newspaper in the Wild
Mhm.
West in Tombstone, and we need to be in it. They want to
Yeah.
get in it. It's a little bit more urgency. Whereas something that's been established for a long period of time, it's kind of like, I don't want to say stale, but it's just not as on the cutting edge. So scaling the business, finding the right area, getting a magazine set up to go in that area, and making sure, again, like we talked about earlier, getting the numbers to the point where I know if I'm going to launch another magazine, I have to have some built-in income to cover that initial baseline of launching a new one.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I mean, it sounds like you're very forward focused, Mike, that you're looking for that next goal or that next target that keeps you excited and in the game. And I think
Listen,
that's a huge tip.
you hear it here first. My goal for 24 is $2 million.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever done $2 million. So I'll tell you my goal. First year was, hey, I want to go over $1 million. Okay, did that. Second goal was I wanted to do 1 million 2 years in a row, because I don't know how many people at BVM, because the products have changed and they've expanded
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
15 years ago. So it wasn't as frequent someone went over 1 million, but not many people have done over 1 million their first 2 full years at BVM. Wanted to do that. And
Mm.
now I wanted to go above 500 grand. I did that. I want to have the single largest sale. That's one. I got a couple of big fish I'm going after, and I want to go over 2 million. So if I could do those
Yeah.
two things in 2024, and this will show you my vanity, okay? So I'll let it out into the public. Currently, I hold the record for 2 months, the month of August and the month of December. I want to get another. I want to be able to say I held 3 in one calendar year of BVM records, and there's a couple there that are right for the plucking.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
eyeballing those right now.
Yeah. I that August record still haunts me, Mike. The
That
you
August, it was
you
close. It came
sandbagging
down
me.
to like
Hey, Mike,
well,
how's it going? Oh man, I don't think I'm gonna get many more sales, and then poof, you got 80,000 more or some
it was a
crazy
last
number
minute
like
one that came
overnight.
in, but then you went on vacation, so it kind of that helped me too. I'll admit that helped me too.
That was fun. That was fun.
Uh,
Well, this has been awesome, and I know very, very helpful for the listeners, regardless of where they are in the spectrum of publishing. Any final tips, words of advice for the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I would say like all the stuff we talked about. My division manager, my division leader, where they changed the title, my division leader told me early on. I remember I was about, before you handheld me to my first sale, I had been doing this probably like 3 weeks, and I had gone on 50 appointments, or like 30 appointments, and I hadn't made a sale. And I called my division manager and I said, listen, I was really good in my ad agency. Like, I stink at this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know what's
Yeah,
happening. We went over my presentation. She was like, your presentation is fine. She said, listen, the one tip I can tell you, and this is the one tip I have said to every new publisher coming out, and it even applies to people that have been doing this a while: activity, activity, activity.
mm,
If you are staying
mm,
active and doing revenue generating activity, you are just bound to stumble into a couple of sales.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, and it's usually, and this way for me, I won't put this on any other publisher. When I'm not making sales, it is 100% all me. It is my mind isn't right, my focus
mm,
isn't right. So it's a matter of the more active I stay, the more focused I am. The more focused I am, the better I am at making sales, and it just kind of falls into place.
yeah, yeah. That's great. I remember when I was first starting out reading and listening to Jed Blount. Is it Blount? Blunt? I always butcher his last name. He's the he wrote a number of books, but the one about prospecting, which again I'm drawing a blank. How pathetic! But he talked about when you make a sale, you need a certain number of prospects to make up for that prospect that you just sold. And to your point about activity, and that's where cold calling becomes a grind for publishers. And it's not that calling is bad or it doesn't work. Of course it does,
Yeah.
but when you combine that with not having a sale in a while and the energy and the emotional component versus, like you said, whether it's a podcast or throwing six other lines in the water, so you have, all right, if cold calling isn't working or I get too busy today because I have a day full of presentations, there are five other fish biting in
Right.
the other ponds for you, right?
Right.
And that's, again, I know just from talking with you, that's where you've excelled. You're not counting on that one thing. The worst number I've heard in marketing is just doing one thing, because if that one thing stops working, you're out of business.
Yeah, it's all
And
your eggs in one basket. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, same thing with
yep,
anything, right? So if you're investing in finance, they tell you diversify. It's the same
yep,
thing when you're trying to grow your business. If I have an appointment setter doing some, automation doing some
yep,
from the podcast, and me doing some, there's always going to be a day when one of us isn't functioning
yeah,
optimally and the others pick up the slack, and you always have
yeah.
something coming in. It's crazy.
I always loved it when I would my probably booking agents slash appointment setters didn't like it so much when, like, on Wednesday, we're like, no more calls. We're through. We're already booked solid next week. Don't make
Yeah.
any more calls.
Well, it's funny. So when we first launched the Good Neighbor podcast in Pasco County here in Tampa, we had a couple days open. Like we had like 4 days open where we had short windows in each day. And I found what worked for me too. And anybody thinking about the podcast is I just have right now it's one day. That's it. Because
Mm,
at one point I was booking out 3 weeks and had stuff spread all over the place. So
yeah,
now I consolidated it to one full day of doing it. And basically I can do 5 or 6, 7 podcasts in a day because they're not long. That's 7 appointments. And then what that allows me to do is immediately flip them to the BVM appointment the next day or the day after. I don't have to
yeah,
record other podcasts in there. So structuring it that way worked best for me. But again, there's a bunch of people doing podcasts in various different podcasts that aren't necessarily the Good Neighbor podcast. And
hmm,
they're finding what works for them. What worked for me
yeah,
is the consistency of a day, meet with them there, flip them right to BVM,
yeah,
and then I open my calendar up so someone could book 2 and 3 weeks out. But here's the other beautiful part. And again, revenue generating activity. I have one right now is booked they've been booked since December for January 30th. It's a Tuesday. The nice
uh-huh,
thing about the podcast is the automation does all the work for me. And
yeah,
I tell them they get that initial email with the questions. They're going to get an email reminding them a day before, an hour before, and 15 minutes before. If you miss the meeting, if you miss the podcast, you clearly are either under a rock, trapped under a refrigerator, something's going on, or you just don't want to talk to me. But either way, we
yeah,
figure it out
yeah,
because the automation handles all that. That's not taking away my time
yeah,
from having to do the stuff that makes money.
yeah, yeah. The other thing I found, so I was in the business for a little over 3 years, and I could call or meet people that I interviewed 3 years prior. They take my call. They knew exactly who I was because we show up differently. And I'm guessing you have found the same.
So you bring up a great point with that is I can tell you in my CRM, I came out of training August 1st of 2021. I had a law firm in my database and it's all documented. I can prove it out.
Uh-huh.
Their date they were input in my system was August of 2021. I called this guy gatekeeper every time, couldn't get through. What is this regarding? Blah, 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 blah. My booking agent, appointment setter, reached out and said, look, we'd love to have you on the podcast, talk a little bit about your firm. Booked in a minute on the podcast and signed a $160,000 agreement 3 weeks later when I finally did my second follow-up with them when I could get on his calendar. So, and loves the magazine. He's an expert contributor. He writes great articles, like loves it. That's the biggest differentiator. So
Yeah.
do I get 3 yeses? Do I have an appointment setter setting appointment? Yes. The people that I know that are going to be a little bit trickier, it just gives me another tool
Yep.
in the
Yep.
toolbox to go after them. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. What's
worked.
the old definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I mean, the gatekeeper is always going to deny us. So let's try a different strategy, whatever it is, whether it's a podcast or something else. You drive yourself into the ground if you just keep making those calls. Hey, it's me again.
I could send her a box of chocolates with my phone number on it. That might work, but
Yeah.
it's listen, this is probably gonna be bad to say, but it's like when you're dating, when you go to a bar and you're trying to date, it's sometimes the line works, sometimes the line doesn't work. It's having the extra line to be able to come back and walk around the bar again and come back with a different line. It's all it is it's just reshaping the verbiage to find something that connects you to that particular person. Some people connect well with the podcast. Some people let you right through and are dying to have the meeting. And some people, it takes a little bit of time. But I mean, listen, it's documented. My CRM, I called every single month for 22, not even 18 or 19 months in a row, from August of 21 until June of 22. So maybe it was only 12. Maybe it was like 12. No, it was 23. He just went in. So yes, 20 months calling this guy, never get through. And she got through with the podcast. So it's just a different way to shape it. And look, my thing is this, Charlie. If it ends up turning into an agreement and builds that relationship, I don't care if I have to use a raven like in Game of Thrones, or if it's a podcast, or if I have to throw pebbles at their window at 12 o'clock at night. Whatever gets me the appointment to get me the opportunity to get them into my communities, I'll do it. It doesn't matter. I'll try it.
Yep. All right. Just as long as you don't get arrested. That's all.
You're right. I'll wait till like morning. I'll wait till it's morning, and I'll make sure the pebbles are tiny enough to not break glass.
I love it. All right. Well, hey, man, this has been awesome, Mike. I really appreciate you spending time with us. I know you're heading to the conference in a couple days, and you got a busy schedule, so I will let you go. But we're going to keep an eye on the record books, and we definitely want to check in as the year progresses. And yeah, kudos to you. Early kudos for being the first $2 million year.
BBM let's not jinx it. I text somebody at the company and said, hey, can you tell me how many people have gone over $1 million each of their first 2 years? And I was at like 970,000. And it was like a stall for like over Christmas. And I'm like, I jinxed it. I totally jinxed myself. I'm going to fall 30 grand short and I'm not going to do it. And then all of a sudden a bunch of stuff happened. I'm like, whew, dodged a bullet there. I'm a big karma. So this isn't a $2 million celebration. We'll talk about that in a year from now.
It sounds like a plan, Mike. All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day there.
Thanks, Charlie. You have a good one. Appreciate it. Always good talking to you.
Say goodbye to cold calling, chasing leads, and waking up on Monday with a blank calendar for the week. Now you can join publishers throughout the U.S. who have plugged into a systematic path to sales growth without adding more work or overhead. If you're ready to have more fun while you scale your business and income, go to nocoldcallsever.com.